Hey, Tennessee coaches, thanks for logging on. You're here with us at ICF Tennessee Live. We're celebrating Pride this month with Pride in Coaching with a wonderful interview with Sarah Taylor. She's an LGBTQ plus coach and inclusion trainer. I want to just give us a little heads up while everybody's just logging on and getting settled in for what's going to be a fantastic interview, to sort of let you understand why we're doing these live events and why it's important to the chapter. You see, the chapter really believes and wants to promote that everyone has a right to dignity and equality and self-affirmation. But we also know that there's a lot of room for us, even though we're open and willing and able, there's a lot of room for us to learn. And so we hope with these live events that we've been bringing to you around cultural awareness and identity, that it can help raise your awareness and improve society's perspectives, as well as continue to encourage inclusiveness through our coaching. And so we think it'll make us better coaches. You know, our ICF core competencies sort of charges us to really examine ourselves as coaches, to make sure that we're operating with a coaching mindset, that we have an ethical practice in how we actually do our coaching and how we actually are being a coach. And so that means being open to other cultures and other people's perspectives and life experiences. So I couldn't be more happy today to introduce to you Sarah Taylor. Sarah, thanks for coming and being with us today. I'm so grateful that you're here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Brenda. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you all. So I'm Sarah Taylor, and my pronouns are she, her. And yeah, it's just great to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about you and how you founded your coaching business.
So yeah, I founded my coaching business around about 6 years ago. That was when I started to work for myself. So as a self-employed coach, if you like. And before that, I like it a lot. Before that, I had a very long corporate career as a senior manager, senior leader, working in human resources. So particularly specializing in training and development and people development. So there was quite a large element of coaching in my corporate work already. And then I decided that I wanted to, start my own coaching business, which I did. Did my ICF accreditation and all of those things. My coaching, my why I coach the people that I coach. So I specialize in working with LGBTQ plus people. It's really because of my own lived experiences and the challenges that I've had. So I identify as a gay woman, a lesbian, and it took me 30 years to accept my sexuality, basically. So I spent most of my career, my corporate career, not really out at work. I hid my sexuality. I felt ashamed of the fact that I was gay. And I didn't come out until I was 30, and that was to myself. And then, I'm 57 now, and it took me probably another 10, 15 years after that in my corporate career to start telling people in the workplace. And even when I left, 6, 7 years ago, I still wasn't really properly out at work. I still felt uncomfortable about it. And now look at me, now I'm actually working completely in the LGBTQ plus space. So my own journey of acceptance and really knowing that I am equally worthy and equally deserving as anybody else is what I want for all of my clients. So that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think we all want that for our clients, no matter what. We know that they're a whole person and they're worthy. And that's really the lesson we're trying to get them to learn for themselves, is that they're worthy just like they are, just as they are.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's good work. So what would you say are some of the key challenges or struggles, I guess, with LGBTQ plus people today?
I think mental health is one of the biggest struggles and challenges for LGBTQ plus people, and well-being in general. So the mental health struggles of LGBTQ plus people are at least twice as high. So there's been quite a number of surveys done that, the research and the results of those surveys have shown that the mental health struggles of LGBTQ plus people are at least twice as high than those of non-LGBTQ plus people. Access to healthcare and well-being services as well is difficult for a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community. And me, as a sort of a white cisgendered woman, even for me, when I go to the doctors, for example, and they ask me questions about contraception, or they ask me questions that assume that I am heterosexual, it's uncomfortable, and, when you start looking at transgender people, in our community, it's just, there's so many barriers to not only accessing healthcare services, but also, actually feeling safe in those spaces. So I'd say that's another one of them. The fact that being LGBTQ plus is still a crime. It's a criminal offence in over 70 countries in the world right now. It's not even something that some people in some of those countries can contemplate. It's just not safe for them to even be who they are. Also, law, legislation, it's always, our rights are always under threat. And hate crime, even murder, people being killed for being who they are in some places in the world. So yeah, they're the big ones, I would say, in terms of the challenges and struggles. And I guess the other thing to say is that I live in the UK, and we have anti-discrimination law that covers, that protects us in the UK. But that doesn't mean that we're not affected, or it's not harmful to us to know that there are places in the world where it's not safe to be who we are, places in the world that if we were to travel to, we just don't know whether it would be safe, whether we would be safe. And just knowing that creates a sort of anxiety within us, even though it's not necessarily, you might think it's not directly affecting us, but it's intrinsically about who we are, so of course it affects us.
Yeah. And I really think, Sarah, as a middle-aged white woman who is heterosexual, I can think that I have an understanding of what that might be like, but I really don't have the lived experience to really understand what that's like. And trying to find the empathy in my coaching practice to be totally open and available for clients who may be of the LGBTQ plus community is just vitally important. And so when you think about your coaching and the coaching industry in general, what do you see the sort of the big challenges are for coaches who might find themselves with a client perhaps that identifies as LGBTQ plus?
I think some of the things that I've noticed and experienced myself is that it's not something that's typically thought about. So in my own coaching training that I did, it was never mentioned. It was very, I guess the whole context of it is very heteronormative. And when I say heteronormative, I mean, the assumption that straight, and I guess it's cis heteronormative, so straight is the norm, and cisgender, and for anyone that doesn't know what that means, cisgender is when you identify as the same gender that you were assigned at birth, whereas transgender is when you identify as a different gender to the one you were assigned at birth. So, the whole concept, the whole context and the whole environment and all of the assumptions that are made, in my experience of, the sort of coaching space, certainly when I did my training, which was a few years ago now, was that everyone is cisgender and, everyone is straight, I suppose, and that we didn't really, so there's kind of like being in that space as an LGBTQ plus person, but also we didn't sort of talk about or consider how we might support people from the LGBTQ plus community. And I think that also another interesting thing, when you are supporting LGBTQ plus coaching clients, is heteronormativity, this sort of idea, this social construct, really, which is what it is, means that, that's a real thing. It's not a limiting belief. It's not a story. It's not something that, it's not for challenge. It's not there to be challenged. It's real. And I think that's important to acknowledge and recognize, as a coach working with somebody, and understand, like you say, with empathy, and be really sort of open and curious about, as opposed to thinking that you could know what that's like, yes. Because of course, just as I don't know what it's like to be somebody else from another marginalized community. So I think, there's some of the things that come to mind for me when we're talking about the coaching industry, I suppose.
Yeah. So what I heard you just say was this idea of all of us as just human beings in this world that we live in need to be open and curious and don't make any assumptions or judgments about who or what someone else, either their identity or their life experience. And this could not help but go back to that is really the foundation of coaching, right? Coaches is how we are supposed to be. And we're supposed to check our own biases to make sure that those aren't bleeding into the things that the questions we're asking or the challenges we bring to our clients. So I think this is a really good reminder of that. And I wonder, can you share a little bit more about sort of your personal and professional experience with being a coach?
Yeah, and absolutely, what you just said there about checking our own biases, and just because I am from the LGBTQ plus community doesn't mean that I don't have those biases as well. My biases actually feed into something called internalized homophobia, which is, something that I would say I've done a lot of healing work on, a lot of personal development work on. But internalized homophobia is basically believing that you are wrong because you are gay, and that is because society, and the way that we are all brought up is that there's something not quite right. There's something different. There's something, all sorts of things that people believe about LGBTQ plus people that are formed on, this societal sort of cultural constructs and beliefs, you know, that are just not true. So yes, you know, that kind of thing, and sitting in front of that person when you're in that coaching space, I suppose, and making assumptions based on what they look like, how they talk, the clothes they wear, their haircuts, you know. I have, you know, and still do, you know, people assume that I am straight because of the way that I look. You know, and I've even had people say to me, well, it's good, isn't it, that you don't look gay? And I'm kind of like, what's wrong? You know, there isn't, first of all, there's no one way to look like a lesbian or any other member of the LGBTQ plus community. And if there was, what would be, why is it, you know, how can it be okay to say to somebody, oh, well, it's good if you don't look like an LGBTQ plus person? I mean, that is just to me an insult, basically. So yeah, I think it's definitely that checking your own biases and really having that sort of open mind and curiosity around. You don't know someone's gender identity until you know it, and you don't know their sexual orientation either until you know it.
We have a question coming from someone who's watching the live, and the question is about how other coaches address sexual and gender identity in their intake process. And I wonder, can you speak to that a little bit about how you go about doing that?
Address it as in finding out, I suppose. Is that kind of what we're asking?
So so the intake process of coaching. Yeah,
I think it has its place for sure, and it can be valuable. I would suggest that you could ask somebody's pronouns. You know, what pronouns do they use? And I would add to that, if they use pronouns or if they're comfortable to share them, you know, because not everybody will want to necessarily tell you what their pronouns are. Some people are still questioning their sexual orientation or their gender identity. So they may not know in the moment when they're, you know, in that intake process what their pronouns are. In terms of sexual orientation or anything beyond that, I probably wouldn't recommend that was something that you would capture, you know, in that intake process. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely asking pronouns is.
Yeah. So why is the use of the proper pronouns, and us today, we both have our pronouns in our badge there, our name badge. Why do you think that's so important, or an important first step?
I think it's really important because it acknowledges that there are more than two genders in the world. So when we talk about pronouns, we're talking about she, her, and hers. You know, if you identify as a woman, he, him, and his. If you identify as a man, the most commonly used non-binary or gender fluid or gender non-conforming pronouns are they and them, they, them, and theirs. But there are other gender neutral pronouns. And I think what it does is it helps people to understand that you recognize that there are more than two genders in the world. The world isn't binary. And yet, yes, someone just commented there, you know, it helps other people to feel more comfortable to share theirs. And some people don't use pronouns. Some people just use their name. Some people use a combination of pronouns. You know, some people might use she, they. Some people might use she, he, they. People that are gender non-conforming or gender fluid or another gender identity. So again, it's, really not making assumptions and ensuring that your client, your client gets to share that with you in whatever way works best for them.
Works best for them. That's right.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of comments here about clients not using pronouns, but also that just recently with the updated ICF core competencies, that ICF has adopted a gender neutral language within within the core competencies, which has also been very appreciated by a lot of coaches. So I know that you have a resource to share with us. One of them is around terminology. And Dr. Finch is going to pop that into the chat for everybody, a link to your research on LGBTQ language. Because some language is inclusive and some language is not. And I think one of the things that I, in my own self-reflection that I've come to understand is some of the use of language is cultural, and it's also habitual. It's just how we always have said it. And so taking a real deep look at finding a better way to doing that. So what kind of tips could you give us on more inclusive language?
Yeah, I think it's so important to recognise that when we use language that isn't inclusive, we risk alienating our clients, in this case that we're talking about, but alienating LGBTQ plus people. And, more than that, we risk causing them harm. And certainly not including them. So when we talk about non-LGBTQ plus inclusive language, it's things like ladies, gents, boys and girls, because, we're assuming that all the people that we're talking to identify as either women or men. And again, it's that sort of binary gender. And what other terms are not inclusive? Things like, if you're talking about wives and husbands, yes, of course, LGBTQ plus people do have wives and husbands, if they're in same-sex relationships. But sometimes those terms can be used in a context when you're making the assumption that people have an opposite sex partner. So there are things to avoid as well. And I think that things like, boyfriend, girlfriend, obviously. And when you get onto things like mailman, or chairman or policeman, those sorts of things, so it's in our society, everywhere. And I think, once we start getting, it's very systemic, but once we start raising our awareness, this is one of the big things about allyship. We start to see and notice, where it exists, and can help other people, to become aware of language that isn't inclusive. So inclusive language, LGBTQ plus inclusive language, would be things like, just saying hi, hello everybody, or hello everyone, or hi folks. A lot of people use folks. In the USA, maybe y'all is one. It's not quite one that I can, kind of get quite behind, with my British background. Quite like it though. Friends, team. There's so many alternatives that we can use when we're addressing a group of people. Party people, I love it. What else? And when we're talking about we talk about partners, in a relationship with, rather than have you got a husband or a boyfriend? It's like, if you want to ask somebody that, what about a partner? Do you have a partner? Are you in a relationship? Parents, I think, it's a big one when you start getting into things like the birthing world. People that work, with parents, and, men can be pregnant, and I know that's one that took me a while to get my head around, but yeah, trans men have periods. They give birth. So yeah, it's parents, that kind of stuff, really. Yeah, and male clerk, chairperson, those kinds of things. There's some of the examples.
Yeah. We're trying to build allyship at ICF Tennessee. So talk to us a little bit about some of the best examples you've seen of businesses really doing allyship well.
Yeah, this is a good question. And I talk to a lot of businesses about doing allyship well. And I'd love to see more of it happening. I think there's, some of the things we've talked about, and I think, we've already talked about today, which is about using inclusive language. It's about having, if you've got communities of practice, or, some of the professional coaching communities that I might be a member of, or, people that have coaching programs, those sorts of things, or run coaching training, really acknowledging and recognizing, that they are inclusive. They make sure that people like myself, because one of the things that I have experienced is being in coaching and wellness communities, I suppose, where the assumptions are made, that everyone in there identifies as a woman, and that they have, if they have partners, they're going to be opposite sex. There's a lot of ladies going on in there, so people using that terminology, and it can feel, it just makes you feel like you're not really seen. You can feel quite invisible. And that, as we all know as coaches, is not the best way to help somebody show up fully as themselves, to feel, to sort of feel safe as well. I think there's something about feeling welcome in a space, but there's also something about feeling safe and knowing that if it is somebody that is setting the kind of standards in that space, that they are leading by example, they are role modeling that, because that is so powerful, obviously. So the allyship that I see that has the most impact is where there are, that leader, that business leader is role modeling inclusion, inclusive behaviors, language, terminology, and who is, making sure that it's in their values, and that they're, I've just joined a coaching community as the sort of LGBTQ plus inclusion expert, that they've invested in it because it matters. Also things like, gender inclusive bathrooms and stuff like that, organizations that have, it's not difficult to do that really at all. And bringing in, guests, if you're having panel events or guest speakers, really thinking about diversifying the speakers, the panels that you have, all those sorts of things, I think really can, just have such a massive impact and change the whole sense of your organization, because you're bringing in those voices And you're also giving a platform, providing a platform for LGBTQ plus people to be heard and to be visible and to
belong.
It's and to belong.
Now you're accepted. We honor you. You belong. We respect you. All of the things that we all want as human beings. I know you've shared a resource with us. It's the LGBTQ plus inclusive business guide, and Dr. Finch is going to drop that in the comments for everybody. Thank you so much for those resources. I think they'll be really valuable in helping coaches to sort of incorporate all of that into their businesses. I was in preparation for our time together and just in my own inner work, I've been reading Atlas of the Heart with Brené Brown, and she talks about empathy. And as I was thinking about what's the skill that we need to have as coaches, empathy just kept coming up over and over. And she has this opinion about empathy that I wanted to share with this group today. She says, empathy is connecting with people so we know we're not alone. And I thought that was a different way of looking at empathy. She said, empathy is a way to connect to the emotion of another person, the emotion that they're experiencing, and that it doesn't require us to have experienced the same situation that they're going through. And as I thought about that, I thought, well, let's just replace empathy with allyship and reread that, allyship is a way to connect to someone who's having an emotion that they're experiencing, and it doesn't require us to have experienced that same situation in order for us to go through it with them, if that makes sense. And that's whether it's, today we're talking about LGBTQ, but we could also be talking about race or gender, ethnicity, any of those things that can divide us sometimes. And as coaches, we really have to find a way to embrace that. It's really almost a moral imperative, if you ask me, at this point in our society. So what do you think the biggest challenge is for an LGBTQ coach? What's the biggest challenge in the industry for them?
Yeah. I'd love to just speak to what you just said, actually, for a moment. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. About empathy and connecting with another human being, and the emotion that they're feeling. I really love that, because what made me think about was, although we don't have a shared lived experience necessarily, we've probably all felt othered, or like we don't quite fit in, or shame, or some of those really difficult emotions, or fear or anxiety because of who we are, or what will happen if I show people this part of me that I'm really not sure I can accept myself, and all of those things. So I think that is, that's a really wonderful way to think about it, when you're in that coaching space with somebody, to help you connect with them. So I really like that. So your question, biggest challenges for LGBTQ plus coaches. I think I'd really love to hear any comments, actually, or see any comments from anybody that's watching around that, what people might think, or feel that the biggest challenges are for LGBTQ plus coaches. Are we talking about, or coaches coaching LGBTQ plus people?
Yeah. I'm not seeing any comments just now, but just drop it into your comment field, whichever platform you're watching, and it will pop up on our screen. So if you have any thoughts about what the challenges might be for an LGBTQ coach, or if you are one, or if you have any questions for Sarah, just drop them in the comments down there, and we'll talk them through. Yeah.
And I think for me, as an LGBTQ plus coach, I started out not as an LGBTQ plus coach because I couldn't see any. And when I started my business, I was like, well, no one's doing it, like, so maybe there's no demand. I really thought that maybe there's no demand for it, which is crazy now when I think about it. And now it's different. I do feel there are more LGBTQ plus coaches out there who are out in their business. I think that still, I did a survey myself of coaches who identify as LGBTQ plus, and it was with about, I think it's about 100 people, so quite a small survey, and of the people that participated in that, around about 35% of them, and they've all got active coaching businesses, were not out in their business. That they were all based in the UK. Where, as I say, we've got law that protects us against discrimination. And that was just so telling for me, that their fears were that if they were out as an LGBTQ plus person, as a coach, that they would lose clients or that people wouldn't want to work with them. So I think that's one of the challenges. And I think that, also it's visibility and representation is still a big one. Like I say, I'm in communities, I'm in professional communities. I did my training, however many, that was well over probably a couple of years. I didn't even know there were other people. Now I found out who identify as LGBT, and I spent every weekend with them. I didn't know that there was other LGBTQ plus people there, So you feel, it feels quite lonely. And I think they're some of the ones as an LGBTQ plus coach working in the coaching space.
We've had a couple of comments come through. The first one is that people often assume if you're an LGBTQ plus coach that you only coach in the queer community. And that's a question that's actually come up in many of the identity and cultural awareness conversations we've had is, do I need to be LGBTQ in order to coach someone who is from that community, and vice versa? And so what are your thoughts around that?
Oh, sorry, I was just seeing the comment there.
Other comments,
in the queue. What my thoughts around the fact that people might assume that you only coach LGBTQ plus people. I think they do. I think that is very likely. For me, that is who I coach, I suppose. I do get inquiries from people who aren't LGBTQ plus and say, do you coach? Do you only coach? And I say, no, absolutely. If we're a good fit, I'll work with you. So I guess just knowing that there are probably people who don't inquire because they make that assumption. And I think it's a tricky one. That is my niche, so I'm comfortable with it. But if it's not your niche, then I guess, so it's kind of like through your marketing and through the way that you engage with your client community or your potential clients, it's making it clear that you coach, all people of all genders and all sexual orientations.
There's another comment here about people don't necessarily understand what two-spirited means. 2 S's in parentheses.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means, so to Angela's comments, this is an opportunity to educate us who don't know these things intuitively.
So I'd love that person to, if you know, I'm kind of making a bit of an assumption there that they are really clear about what two-spirited means. For me, what I know about it is that it is a, you know, it's an identity, a gender identity that has been around. You know, non-gendered people or gender non-conforming people, and gender fluid people, and people who identify differently to the binary Native American symbology. Thank you. Yes, have been around forever. You know, I think it's interesting that there's a belief or a narrative that this is new, or this is something that is odd or strange, or, you know, where the truth and the reality is that, you know, people who identify differently and identify in these ways have been around for a very long, you know, forever and ever. I know Jonathan Van Ness, if you're familiar with them. Are you familiar with them? They did the Queer Eye series.
Oh, yes. I'm familiar with that. Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking books and authors when you said that.
Okay.
So I wasn't thinking TV. Yes. Yes.
So Jonathan Van Ness has did an they have, I'm pretty sure they identify as they. They've got a Netflix series, and they don't gender their babies and children. Yeah, I love that. You know, I love that. Sorry, I've been interrupted there by that. Because this whole, like, what that makes me think about is this whole kind of like thing around gender reveal parties and all of those things, you know, like a child, you know, is again, it's this whole societal conditioning that happens to us. So Jonathan Van Ness has got a great Netflix series, and one of those episodes, they have a two-spirited person, and they're talking about gender, and they're talking about gender identity. It's well worth a watch. I loved it, and, you know, learned myself. You know, I'm learning too. You know, I'm on that journey. I'm in that space where I think that I know it all and I've got it all nailed when we're looking at this work. You know, I'm an ally too. I'm an ally to other members of the LGBTQ plus community, and it's an evolving landscape. So, you know, it's not a prescriptive thing. I can, you know, I've provided some guides today and some guidance. It's not something that you can, you know, write a prescription for and say, okay, if you do all of these things, you know, you'll never mess up. You'll never have an awkward moment or feel uncomfortable. It just doesn't work like that.
And I honestly feel, Sarah, with all my heart, that just making a decision that I'm going to be an ally helps me to just be comfortable in the uncomfortable. Like I have to remain in these uncomfortable conversations, in these uncomfortable positions, and know that as an ally, I'm not going to get it right every time. But to have no judgment about if I hear that someone needs something different, to just being open to receiving that without challenging it or trying to put it into these societal boxes that we've created. I mean, I know for me, that's how I feel. It's some of these conversations about race, about gender, about identity, they're all uncomfortable for us if we're not used to having them. But the more we have them, the more we'll get comfortable. We'll get comfortable being uncomfortable and open to hearing how we can make other people feel included and belonging in the world.
Yeah. And you probably will make mistakes.
I know I do.
We all do. We all have.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully the respectfulness of the dialogue is one that we can learn from each other, and and do better. Once we know better, we can do better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does the Q, what is it about the Q at the end of LGBTQ? Help people understand what that means.
I think there's a couple of things perhaps that come up around this. And one is that the Q typically stands for queer. And there's some nuances, I suppose, around the term queer. It can also stand for questioning. And yeah, so they're the two. If anyone else has got any other ways of queer that the Q is used, then please do let me know. So when we're talking about queer, I think that was used for a long time as an insult. You know, it was used as a way of questioning. Yeah, as a way of, you know, in a discriminatory way against LGBT identifying people. It has been reclaimed by quite a large population, I would say, of the LGBT plus community. So I'm not using the Q now. And I think there's that's kind of like there's quite a political sort of activist movement that use the term queer. And I think the other thing that I personally like about the term queer, I didn't used to identify with it. I do more so now. It's in my Instagram handle, you know. So what I like about the term queer is it's more of an umbrella term. So it feels there's a lot of space in there to be and identify in whatever way you do. And it may be that on one day you feel and identify in a particular way, and on another day it might be slightly different. And it all works, you know, under the queer umbrella. So I think that's a great thing about that term. It gives you that space and that freedom, and you're not limited by, for example, for me, you know, a lesbian kind of box, for example. So yeah, that's what I would say about the Q.
Okay. Well, we're trying to understand the coaches in ICF Tennessee, and we're trying to really help to make sure that we're honoring and embracing and including everyone. So I'm going to have Akina drop in our survey. It's our cultural and identity survey that's been out for a month or so. And we're asking all members or potential members to take a look at the survey and answer the questions that you feel comfortable answering. And the reason for the survey is for us to just really help to better understand the coaches in our chapter so that we can be more inclusive and have better representation. So if you get a chance to hop onto that survey and take a look at it, we would very much appreciate it. We're doing the survey along with a listening tour also, Sarah. I think I shared with you before. We're hitting the 4 big cities in Tennessee to talk with coaches in those regions about what they need as coaches and how we can better help them. And educational things like this, I think, are going to come through in our conversations. I know I've heard it already. Just the thank yous for everyone in hearing what you have to say, helping to provide us with some resources to help us be allies and good, effective allies. And also the permission that we might make a mistake, and it's okay, as long as our intentions are in good order. So tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you if they need more information, or perhaps maybe they need a coach. How can they get in touch with you?
Okay, so thank you so much, Brenda. It's been a really great conversation. So you can get in touch with me via my website, which is sarah-taylor.co.uk. On LinkedIn, it's probably one of the places. LinkedIn and Instagram is where I'm most active. So my LinkedIn is Sarah Taylor Coaching. And on Instagram, I am at Sarah Taylor Queer Coach. I love that comment that just came up. It's like, I'm becoming more comfortable with my queerness, the more comfortable I am within myself, or something like that, which I love that.
Yeah,
That's
that's
wonderful. I
wonderful.
became my queerness, the more comfortable I became saying I'm queer. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. So Sarah, I know on your LinkedIn profile, you have a lot of resources there. Coaches can look you up there on LinkedIn, and there's a video series where you said there's lots more information, or lots of ways that people can connect. And Dr. Finch has dropped your LinkedIn profile right there in the comments for people who want to take a look.
Great.
Yeah, Sarah, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and helping us to really be a more effective ally with the LGBTQ plus community. Thank you so much for your time today. And if I could ask Dr. Finch to please turn her camera on, I want to share with everyone the person who is behind the scenes in all of our technology ventures here at ICF Tennessee, whether it's text messaging or social posts or bringing you these beautiful live events like this. Dr. Finch, thank you so much for all that you do for the chapter. You are a gift that just keeps giving all the time, and you can see the thank yous coming in for resources and for the safe place to dialogue. Thank you all so very much for doing this. And so we'll let the comments keep rolling in, but I think that's the end of our dialogue for today, Sarah. Again, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Everything. Yes.
You're so welcome.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your story, perspectives, resources. Be a better ally. Fantastic. Wash your hands. I don't know what that means, but I know Jennifer, I know it's positive. Yeah. Beautiful.
Fabulous. Yeah. Thank you to all of you allies for being allies. You know, this is how we create change.
Yeah. Very welcome. Good. Lovely. That's great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Clapping hands. That's what Jennifer meant.
Perfect.
Perfect.